I'm Eric Snodgrass, Principal Atmospheric Scientist at Nutrient Ag Solutions, and I'm going to thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. We begin first by a map that was released last Friday. It's the statewide precipitation rank maps for February. And you can see here that the state of North Carolina had its 124th out of 126 years in terms of being wet, and it was just the third wettest February we've seen on record. Now what got us there was split flow in the Pacific Ocean, sending a branch of the jet stream over the top like this, another piece cutting under, that's our subtropical or southern branch, which initiated several low pressure systems that drew on an abundant amount of Gulf moisture and Atlantic moisture just to soak parts of the Mid-South, the Southeast, and the Mid-Atlantic. Meanwhile, California was avoided by all of this, having its driest February on record, and so were parts of the north central United States, something I'm going to come back to in just a few moments there. In terms of temperatures, we had our 10th warmest February on record here. In fact, much of the lower 48 seeing above average temperatures throughout the month of February. And now that February is done, we can actually look back over the whole of winter. State of North Carolina, 121st out of 125 years in terms of temperatures, and that is putting us in the top 5 warmest winters we've had on record. When we push this over to precipitation, you can see it was the 10th wettest. Go south of there, South Carolina having its second wettest, both Georgia and Alabama having their wettest December through January time period on record here. So the questions we have to ask ourselves is the pattern that got us here changing? We're going to answer that in a few moments. I want to take you briefly outside of North Carolina to explain to you some of the other conditions we're dealing with around the country. Specifically, we had over the weekend extremely warm temperatures that pushed north in the middle part of the United States, melting away the edge of the snow that you see right in through here, cutting through the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Now, why this is significant is for two reasons. That meltwater is now getting into the topsoil, making things quite rough in terms of soil conditions. You're going to see that in a few moments. And the pattern adjustment you're about to see is going to fill all of this area that you see right in through here back in with snow. So we're going to continue to have a spring flood fight on our hands in the major river systems that are in the middle part of the United States. You can see by looking at that map over there on the right, that's our calculated soil moisture anomaly map. And almost the whole of the Mississippi, the Missouri, and the Ohio river valleys currently have a pretty sizable excess of soil moisture. And to show you what that looks like, take a look at the video that's over there on the right. We're going to go here to Steele, North Dakota, which is right in through here on I-94. And this guy's out here, and you can just see the weight of his equipment is squeezing the water out of the soil here. They actually had a very dry last several weeks. In fact, you saw on the first map that February was a dry month for North Dakota, yet still all of that excess moisture from the last harvest, from the early season snowfall that's now been melting is causing major, major problems in this section of the United States. We have to keep an eye on that because we grow crops in competition with this part of the world. Okay, this next map is probably the most important one I'm going to show you because it's really going to tell you how the pattern is going to be established for the next several weeks. Well, several days at least, okay? I think it might hang on beyond that though. Here we go. You can see off the west coast a large low pressure system sitting and spinning here. We have underneath this a branch of the subtropical jet stream, so that's well above the surface, but screaming over the top of it just like that. Meanwhile, off the east coast today, on Monday, high pressure cell sitting here and the flow around it coming just like this. Now that high pressure cell initially does a couple of nice things. One, it's going to keep us dry because we're close to it at the beginning of the week. It's also going to keep things warm. But it is a moisture feed out of the Gulf, out of the Atlantic. And today it's going to be running into this boundary, producing a lot of very heavy rainfall in this area. Now what I want you to understand is that the jet stream configuration to make it look like this today is going to be on a wash, rinse, repeat cycle for a while. And each time a new low pressure system develops here, and it races on off to the northeast, it will leave frontal boundaries draped into this area, keeping, I'll just kind of shade it in here, this area quite wet in the next 10 to 15 days. This is what it looks like when we stare at the 500 millibar trough ridge pattern. This is the ridge pushing into Alaska. So the jet stream is going to have to go around that ridge, and the cold air that was over Alaska gets displaced and pushed down through the Rocky Mountains like this, setting up a deeper trough that's going to be sitting over California at times. This is 10 days from now. We see that same pattern setting up. The large protective ridge off of the east coast keeps overall warmer than average conditions. We'll have a couple of days of cooler weather, but overall warmer than average conditions. And if this is the ridge designated here by this squiggly line and the deeper trough is there, just remember that it's between the two, I'll shade it in for you, that we have the most active weather pattern. So this is what it does in terms of precipitation anomalies. This is your next 15 days looking at difference from normal in terms of precipitation. Ridge pushes in, trough develops, meets up with the subtropical branch of the jet stream, and right there just lights this area up, which means it's going to continue to be very wet to the west and to the southwest of North Carolina, but we're going to get quite a bit of this as well as we move forward. This also means that that same area, if I go back to it and highlight it for you, this area here and this area here are going to be seeing multiple chances over the next 15 days of severe weather. Now, thankfully, in the next 3 days, I got Monday up here, Tuesday in the upper right, and then Wednesday in the bottom. Over the next few days, the chances of seeing severe weather across the country are limited. So that's simply because of the current setup is not quite fully amplified. I'll show it to you in a few moments. But we do have a few regions we're going to be watching out for some severe storms, and don't be surprised if by midweek we hear some thunder with some of the rain that's coming through North Carolina. Okay, here's that flow pattern. Ready? We have the subtropical branch. This is kind of neat meteorology. It's coming right in through here. We then have a pretty complicated northern branch. It's actually doing two things. One piece comes over like that, and there's a second that breaks off and comes together here. So in the near term, this high over low pattern just off the west coast is complicating the flow, sending some systems over the top here, little waves that kind of move through like this. And then the deeper upper level low here is going to be the slow mover exciting the system for the next 10 to 15 days. So let's take a look at what this is going to do to us. Through next Sunday evening, there's the possibility that much of the state of North Carolina picks up another 3/4 of an inch on the eastern side of the state to as much as 2 inches on the western side of the state. But I'm going to make a case to tell you that I'm not overly confident in these numbers just yet. And here's some of the reason why. In the overnight hours last night, we saw a system building in the midsection of the United States, okay? So this is through early this morning, about 10 o'clock. We can see here off the East Coast, big area of higher atmospheric pressure, giving us a nice day here in North Carolina. Well, this system, like so many will do, is going to push. See this throughout the day, today into tonight, pushes to the north and east, increasing the chances of light rain into the day on Tuesday in the western part of the state, and then eventually through much of the state on Tuesday, just, I'd say, because of the scattered nature of this precipitation, a 30 to 50% chance of seeing some precip as I kind of toggle back and forth here Tuesday morning through Wednesday morning. But after that, as I said, the next wave comes through. Remember, we have the cutoff low here. Watch. If I go back and forth, look over California. There's the cutoff low. But see the wave moving through the midsection of the United States? That's our next chance at precipitation for North Carolina. So let's get to that with the European model and see it. So this is Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. That's our chance at light rain. Now look at this. Wednesday morning, it's now moving through the Midwest. Deeper low is still sitting off the West Coast. So let's see when that increases precipitation chances. Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening, getting into Thursday morning. So you see another chance on Wednesday bringing some precip through. But we're not done there. This is now Thursday afternoon, getting into Thursday evening, and now Friday morning. You can see our next system takes off here through this part of southeastern Canada, and it leaves that frontal boundary, just like I talked to you about on Friday morning. And that stalls out over us Friday afternoon and evening, increasing the chances of more rainfall in this area. So we essentially have 3 different chances of precipitation this week, and by the time we get through the weekend, we could have added that up to about 3/4 of an inch, to in some locations over 1.5 inches. Now the pattern doesn't slow down. This is now Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, and evening, and this will be pushing through the day on Sunday. So we're adding to that total precipitation amount, which is why I think 1 inch to 2 inches across the state, if this last system comes through on Sunday, well, that's what we could possibly see through the next week. Now, just to play the rest of this for you, what do you notice? Nothing slows down here. And that's why when we just look out into week 2 alone, So this is now going to be the 17th through the 24th. We continue to see this same areas having wetter than average conditions. So as long as that ridge pushes up here and the jet stream is doing that, we stay very, very active with our flow pattern through the third week of March here. Now, what about temperatures? Well, today, nice. We're going to be about 10 degrees above average across the state, and that continues, as you can see here, into Tuesday. These are departure from normal, so 5 to 10 degrees above average to start the week. On Wednesday, maintaining much of the same warmth, but I want you to see how things change at the end of the week. There's Thursday, getting into Friday, and then into Saturday and Sunday. Now remember, that's when our precipitation chances really pick up, and that's where we see the cooling off toward the end of the week. So Monday through Friday this week, above average temperatures. Saturday and Sunday, with the increased probability of rainfall, we see the temperatures cooling back off. But the question is, does that last? And the answer is, well, no. Not with the ridge pushing into Alaska, amplifying that pattern. You see we go back over to having day 5 through 10, which takes us out to the 19th of March, favoring warm conditions again. And if I go even farther than that, all the way out to the 24th, we see that same highly amplified pattern keeping things warm across the East Coast. Now I put over there on the left a word of caution. You see, we have seen all winter long that models trying to build a big ridge into Alaska, giving us what's called the negative phase of the East Pacific Oscillation. And each time it's done that, it's not quite fully got the amplitude right. In other words, the waves aren't as big as I keep drawing them over here in terms of the jet stream pattern. So I want to watch this carefully. I still think that any shot at cooler air is very short duration here in North Carolina, with the preference over the next 15 to 20 days to be above average in temperatures. Looking longer term, one of the things I'll be watching is out in the Pacific Ocean, the Mount-Julian Oscillation. Now for North Carolina, we have to switch our thinking a bit as we get toward the spring, and that means that when the MJO goes into phase 6, 7, and 8, those are now the warm phases, with 1, 2, 3, and 4 being the cooler. The MJO is currently sitting here, and it's forecast to do something like that. It's not high amplitude, which means it is not a dominant control on our global weather patterns, but we need to watch it nonetheless. Here's the other things. One, the stratospheric polar vortex. I'm talking about, that rapidly spinning kind of donut of wind sitting on the North Pole. It is going to continue to stay very strong, which means none of our cold air is truly anchored to Arctic air. We have no strong signal coming out of the El Nino region, and although our INSO index called the Southern Oscillation Index is slightly negative, it's not behaving anything like El Nino. What you all want to watch is this figure I have down here in the bottom. It's global angular momentum. Now, what does it mean? Well, whenever we have high values of it, like we did back in mid-January to early February, we tend to have very active weather systems, and that's why we saw those precipitation rank maps early. You can see that the global angular momentum value is building again, and the building of that value is going to indicate that over the next 15 days, we're going to continue to see very active weather. That's what I'm trying to point out to us here. Stretching it out even further, this is March 15th through April 16th. And we can see that precipitation anomalies want to keep North Carolina near average to wetter than average, but you can really see the two pieces of the flow coming in here into the United States. Very active storm track in through this area. Same time period, so March 15th through April 16th, above average in temperature. Now, let's look even longer because it's the beginning of the new month. This is now the forecast for May, June, and July from the European model. And it looks as though the wet start to the year is going to continue in this model. But please remember this about the European long-range forecast. It relies heavily on persistence. And what I mean by that is whatever it was initialized with, the wet conditions, are probably going to continue in the model. It's not going to be very good at picking up on any sort of a major pattern change. So we're going to watch it very carefully, but remember in the long-range forecasts, its precipitation forecast accuracy is only about 40%. So we'll keep a close eye on it, but right now there is good meteorological reason for this. To finish this up, I want to give you a couple of global things to think about, both long-term and short-term. Long-term first. We've noticed that throughout much of this winter, the ocean temperatures here in the Atlantic have been quite warm compared to average. We've noticed they've been very warm over here as well, with cooler water spreading in this area. Now, something I want you to think about. If this warm water causes a shift at all in the Bermuda High, pulling it back to the west with time, there is some concern that that could happen, and we would need to be watching out for some late summer heat and drought stress. Secondly, If this warm water over here stays there and expands east, that would give us an indication of an El Nino-like summer, which could act to counteract any shift in that Bermuda high. The third thing is, though, if that warm water doesn't advance east and the cool water that I'm kind of hashing in through here expands, that is a cause for getting big ridges to form in the midsection of the United States. Now, what does that typically do for the southeast? It tends to keep us quite hot, but a whole lot of thunderstorm activity because we still get good Gulf of Mexico moisture transport into the southeast. So what I'm trying to tell you here is right now, we do not have a clear picture for summer at all. We're going to watch this very carefully because right now ocean temperatures are probably our best long-range bet at seeing things. Globally, we'll just finish this up with a quick snapshot of what's going on around the world. We did have what was left over from Tropical Storm Esther, which was actually once a cyclone here. Look over in Australia. That's where it was. You can see here the big blob of precipitation moving from the central part of Australia to the southeastern corner. Remember, we just hammered this area with all the drought and wildfire back about 2 months ago, and now we've been dealing with flooding. Elsewhere, I want you to keep an eye on South America. We've seen much of the precipitation in a wedge here, while southern Brazil and Argentina has been very dry. You can see it as I play this forward. All the heavy rainfall is here, much drier to the south. Well, over the next 15 days or so, we look globally and we see the tropics are really quite active at sending that moisture north. We see that the heaviest rainfall stays off the coast of Australia. And we see that Europe maintains its very warm bias. But let's come down here to South America to finish this up. Over the next week, Brazil's southern growing regions and most of Argentina stay dry. But it's wet in southern Argentina. Week 2, new model runs are trying to keep almost everywhere that they grow crop down in South America quite wet. So let's keep an eye on this because it could be very impactful for the safrinha cotton and corn crop, and as well as the full season corn and soybeans grown in South America. That was a lot of information today, but I wanted to pass along the latest long-range stuff that I have, plus give you a good global snapshot, but we'll wrap it up right here. Hope you all have a great week, and I'll talk to you next weekend. Thank you.